All right, thank you. My name is Karl. I'm an alcoholic, and I am indeed from a town called Covina. My friend George seemed to think it was called Covine or something like that. And we're pretty proud of our little town. We often get mixed up with West Covina, and we don't even like that either. We're that proud about our little town. Anyway, my sobriety date is January 21st, 1987, and it's a privilege to be asked to do this. I want to thank Joe for asking me to do that. Joe has been joining us at our 5 p.m. daily speaker meeting that the Covina group is hosting every day, and we're having a fantastic time. And I'm supposed to be talking about step 3. And what I want to do first, before I get into why it is that I want to turn my will and life over to the care of something, what does that mean? What is it? What does my will and life mean? What is the care of God? What is all those things in my life? First thing I want to do is talk about what we're all going through first, and this new technology. Just want to throw in my 2 cents on that. I know everybody is probably experiencing some level of anxiety in a million different areas in our lives, myself included. Business has gotten very, very different. Staying at home is very, very different. AA is very, very different. And I'm very, very excited to see and proud of what Alcoholics Anonymous did and how quickly we switched right over here. We are survivors. Man, oh man, are we survivors. That we quickly accepted this technology in order to save our own lives. And what I know so far is this technology is perfectly decent for me to sustain my sobriety. It's obvious, I can tell it already, that this type of Alcoholics Anonymous is perfectly decent for me to sustain my own sobriety. But I don't know yet, and I don't think any of us will know for a few years as to whether this type of Alcoholics Anonymous, this technology, will be strong enough for new people to obtain their sobriety and find long-term sobriety through this. That's going to be the proof in the pudding. We'll see a few years. I'm looking forward to hearing some people get up 5 years from now and tell a story about getting sober during this time. I will be fascinated with that. I also want to chat a little bit just about, there are some people that are very reluctant to embrace this technology, worried about traditions and things. Traditions of and the technology, and I've never had a problem with this, mainly because in the same way, you see, anonymity, the idea of press, radio, and film, now they've included internet. The idea was that Joe Smith in Kansas City was not supposed to wake up in the morning and either open up his newspaper or turn on the television expecting to see some, his regular news or whatever he wanted to watch and get blasted with some celebrity is now talking about being an Alcoholics Anonymous. He made no effort. He was not interested in alcoholism. He made no effort to investigate anything about alcoholism or Alcoholics Anonymous. He meant to be doing something else, and he got hit with something. That's what I believe the spirit of that was. However, if that guy's neighbor happens to become curious about alcoholism, and he drove down and he investigated, opened up the phone book to AA Central Office, found out where the meetings were, the address of the meeting, and he wasn't really alcoholic, and he just wanted to know because of his son, his wife, a relative, maybe he was an employer, wanted to learn more about alcoholism. And he went through that effort to find out about alcoholism, and he drove down to the local meeting hall and walked in there, and it's an open meeting. We would all welcome him. We wouldn't be hiding our faces. We would not be worried about him being there. We would say, welcome. How can we help you? All right. You're welcome to sit in and listen to us. And in this technology we're doing right now, it takes an effort to find us. You don't accidentally wander into this Zoom room, right? Anymore, somebody's just not accidentally dropped in here. They made an effort. They investigated. Look, I need a code and a password. I'm looking for this. Right. And so therefore, I don't think we need to be worried about this at all. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on that. And I need to first of all, before I get into talking about step 3, which I most certainly will spend at least 30 minutes talking about, I'm of a firm belief in Alcoholics Anonymous that I need to talk about my alcoholism a little bit, because have you ever walked into a speaker meeting halfway through after the drunk-a-log was done, and the whole room is right there with them, but you have a hard time getting in there with them, simply because I didn't hear that the guy's an alcoholic. I don't know if you've all experienced that. I've experienced it a number of times. And there's something about the identification process that is absolutely necessary for me to connect with you. And so I'm just going to talk to you about my alcoholism for a little while, and then I'm going to get right into step 3 and what that means for me and how I did it and the experiences I've had. And I'm going to tell you a few stories about how that worked in my life. And then I'm going to probably in the middle of this throw out a bunch of opinions too. I do that very freely. Often throw stuff in that I'm just thinking about now. And I may disagree with my own self years later. I've had people come up to me and say, hey, I heard you say this in 1998. And I go, really? Well, I disagree with that now. Sorry, I said it. So when I was, the reason I would even have to work a step 3, the reason I would even have to turn my will and life over to the care of God, as I understand him, would be because I have a merciless relationship with alcohol. I have this thing called the allergy of the body and an obsession of the mind. Whenever I drink alcohol, I seem to lose control. I literally get thirstier the more I drink. It happens with only alcohol. It happens with nothing else. I've got water here, and over the next 45 minutes to 50 minutes that I'm talking with you, I don't know, I'll probably drink half this bottle, or I might finish the whole bottle of water. But once I finish this bottle of water, I can guarantee you, I am not going to go buy a case of water and lock myself in a motel room, right? There's absolutely no chance of that happening. But if that was really all there was to alcoholism, I wouldn't need a rearrangement of my attitudes and ideas towards life. I wouldn't need what they call a spiritual awakening. I wouldn't need to do work. I would not need to learn to work with others. I would not need commitments. I wouldn't need a sponsor. I just simply would have followed Nancy Reagan's advice of just say no. Right? If that was the only thing that my relationship to alcohol entailed, I would just simply say no. But you see, I have this other part of my relationship with alcohol, and that is, and this part, the book calls it a mental obsession. And this is the part of my relationship with alcohol that literally devastated and just destroyed anybody who loved me, cared about me, or counted on me. And that component of my relationship to alcohol happens when I'm not drinking. And that's even more confusing for people around me. It's like, what on earth is he doing? You see, I have this mind that if I don't drink for a day, a week, or a month, I seem to have a mind that will always paint a picture that will make it okay for me to take another drink, no matter how much pain and humiliation, suffering I have caused a day, a week, or a month ago. And so, you see, no matter what, my mind has always been able to rationalize and justify my walk back to the next drink at all costs. I do not seem to have the necessary rational thinking, the necessary defense mechanism that will keep my mind in the truth about what alcohol does to me, did to me, and will do to me. I absolutely have no power in that area. So because of the physical component of this allergy, this craving, this merciless, unquenchable thirst that happens, I cannot drink successfully. But at the very same time, I cannot not drink successfully because of this thing they call the mental obsession. This is why Alcoholics Anonymous says I have to have a drastic rearrangement of my attitudes and ideas towards life, or I am doomed to continue my life trapped on that hamster wheel, drinking, not drinking, lying about my drinking, lying to get into the next drunk, and arrested, in hospital, swearing off forever, then believing the lie again, drinking, just the constant hamster wheel. And unless I have a complete, as the book says, a complete spiritual awakening, I just like to refer to it as a drastic rearrangement of my ideas and attitudes towards life, I am doomed to that. One of the components of going after that rearrangement of attitudes and ideas towards life is indeed step 3. And we're going to get into that. After a long bout with alcoholism as a teenager and, long hair, concerts, parents trying to do everything they can to try to fix me, but they don't understand that I'm alcoholic. So of course they would, try to fix the people, place, and things in my life, get me out of public schools, put me into private schools, get me away from that group of people. But you see, I'm an alcoholic. My problems are not based upon people, place, and things. My problems are based upon my physical and mental relationship to alcohol. See, if you change the people, place, and things in somebody's life like mine, all that happens is that I'm loaded with different people in different places, ruining different things. And just to give you a little glimpse of where I stood with my family in my early 20s, my father was Swedish, my mother was Icelandic, and I don't know whether this custom I'm about to tell you about is Scandinavian or whether it's Lutheran. I don't know. But at Christmas time, my parents would send out a Christmas card. I mean, they would not send out Christmas cards to their friends and relatives. They would send out this big, long Christmas letter that said everything the family had been doing that year. And when I was about 22, I got a hold of one of these letters that had been sent out the previous Christmas. And as I read it, it let me know exactly where I stood with my family. Now, the first paragraph talked about what my parents had been doing that year. Another impressive year, I'm sure. They were impressive people. They led impressive lives. I could never live up to them, but I'm sure that paragraph was very impressive. The next paragraph talked about what the Morris children had been doing that year. And that paragraph went something like this. Our oldest daughter, Christina, just graduated from Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, with a master's degree in human resources. She's now working for a large pharmaceutical company in the Midwest. She traveled to Europe this summer. She saw this, she saw that. Her hobbies are this, this, and this. She's a very happy young woman. We are very proud of her. Our oldest son, Eric, just graduated from Western Washington State University with a degree in marketing. He's now working for a large advertising firm here in downtown Seattle. He loves to golf. He loves to travel. He's engaged to be married to this wonderful woman named Mary Lou, who works for a very small company here in Seattle named Microsoft. It was small at one time, and they love to golf together. They love to travel together. He's a very happy young man. We are very proud of him. Our youngest son, Karl, just turned 22. They were actually being very kind. So you can see where alcoholism took me, and you can get a picture of the family I came from. And I got to tell you, when I first got to Alcoholics Anonymous, thinking that I'm supposed to identify with other people's stories, I was looking for the alcoholic. People said it's genetic. Many people said they came from alcoholic homes, and that just was not the case for me. I was standing out like a sore thumb in my family. However, and I stayed here a little longer, I found out who to blame it on. My great-grandfather from Iceland, a guy named Bjarne Jónasson, seemed to be the culprit. He left Iceland and left a family in Iceland, married another woman on the ship to Canada. So now he's an alcoholic and a bigamist. And he started a whole nother family in Canada. And I am the great-grandson of that fellow. And I also found out, his name was Bjarne Jónasson. My middle name is Jónasson. I'm the only male that carries his name. There's 47 men that are alive from that man. And I'm the only one that carries my middle name of Jónasson. That's true. Well, that's not really true. I gave that middle name to my son. I hope it's not a curse. Anyway, so through a series of events, I wound up in the military. I was trying to run from drug dealers. I thought 5 years down on a nuclear submarine would be a good place for me to hide. And this should concern you if you care anything about the security of the world and or the United States. But on my way into the Navy, I passed a potential test. It's called the ASVAB test. And this test qualified me to become a nuclear engineer. That should concern you, that the United States Navy would have any type of system in place that would even maybe, possibly, or even remotely allow somebody like me near anything nuclear. However, they made me take another test when I showed up at that base for boot camp, and I could not pass that particular test. That test was called a urinalysis test, is what it's called. I never knew how to study for those things. And I should have been kicked out of the Navy through a series of events. Again, I was kept in the Navy. And a year and a half later, I'm a lower rank than when I first came in, because now my alcoholic binges are getting longer and more severe. I'm 23, I'm 24, I'm 25 years old, and I'm literally going into these 2 and 3 day blackouts. And, you know, the Navy puts a big premium on the men on the ship showing up at the same place every day, especially when the ship is about to leave port. They really put a premium on you being there on time. They're very serious about that. I, a couple of times, was not that serious about it, and it wasn't really on purpose. It's just because a few days earlier, I took a drink, and I literally, you know, it's a very strange feeling coming out of one of these 3 day drunks, finding myself very disorientated, and finally realizing I'm in a foreign country at 6 a.m. I'm standing on a pier looking up and down going, well, there was a destroyer here the other day. Wow. Right? And Navy gets very angry at that. The Navy put me on antabuse at one point. I accidentally drove my car through a guard shack at the front of the Navy base. I still remember the Marine doing this big dive out of there, somersault, back up, weapon drawn, and the whole guard shack got demolished, and I'm stumbling around with minor injuries. And it's one of those mornings where everybody's upset and screaming, and they're pointing at me, and I'm just stumbling around, what, wondering why everybody's so upset. And the Navy, as a result of that, put me on antabuse. That's medical science's best shot at the alcoholic. And again, if just say no worked, antabuse would truly be a miracle drug. It gives you the threat that if you drink, you can get overwhelmingly sick. You can even die from it, and certainly nobody would risk that. I lasted about 10 days, and again, this next thing that I'm going to say really drives home the idea why it is, and it's so amazing that Alcoholics Anonymous understood this, that we just didn't need to stop drinking. That with the real alcoholic, it seems like stopping drinking has no measurable effect, except that I actually become so restless, irritable, discontent. So, well, with me, the best way to describe it is after a few days, I can barely breathe. I am so angry. I literally turn red. I'm one of those guys where you could see the vein pulsing on the forehead. I get twitchy. I literally have no sense of that life means anything unless I can drink. And I lasted about, the best way I can describe this feeling that comes to me is this. You know, throughout my life, some sort of tragedy would often happen. People were, you know, whether it was a wrecked car, flunking out of college after my parents had been sending a check to the university for 3.5 years, losing a job, another time in the hospital, a friend of mine ODing, and all the parents in the neighborhood thinking this is, coming down on all of us kids. And alcohol and drugs, we were separated from it temporarily. And usually, more than often, I would be put in front of some sort of well-meaning, usually a highly educated therapist, counselor, psychiatrist, maybe even a pastor. And all of them would have their own version of saying this to me. They would say it a million different ways, sometimes in long form, sometimes gently, sometimes more aggressively if it was the police that were saying it to me. But they'd all say the same thing. What's the matter with you? Right? And if I would have had the vocabulary that I have now, if I would have had the understanding of my alcoholism, I would have responded to them like this. Especially like when the police would be yelling at you, what's the matter with you? I would have said, I understand. I see that it looks like the price for my drinking is getting very high. I get it. I'm not happy the car is on fire. I see why you're shocked. I get why you're upset. But if you knew how I felt when I wasn't drinking, you wouldn't be asking me why I drink. See, there's no better description of my alcoholism than that there's only one thing worse than the price I'm paying for my drinking, and that is the way that I feel when I'm not drinking. You see, and I don't know how to tell that to anybody, and I got to tell you, a non-alcoholic won't buy it anyway. They would just look at me and say, nonsense, right? And I don't know if anybody out there is new and you've tried to explain alcoholism to a non-alcoholic loved one. Good luck. good luck. They don't need to know, and they will never quite understand it. Out of their love for you, they might nod their head and say, okay. And especially since you're sober, now they have some hope. But the other thing that I found out is that my non-alcoholic loved ones will no more understand what I need to do to stay sober than they would ever understand why I drank, right? And so they even, loved ones will say, why are you going to so many meetings? Why do you take those phone calls? Why are you getting on that plane again? Goodness sakes, aren't you okay yet? And have you ever tried to explain to them? And they, again, if they love you, they'll just kind of surrender and go, okay. But it's sort of useless to try to explain to the non-alcoholic. So I remember on this abuse, finding myself, I went AWOL from my ship, and I locked myself in a little hotel room in downtown San Diego. And I started drinking on top of the abuse. There's a little ritual I would go through. I would take one shot, then I'd take another shot. Usually on the second shot, I would get a little red face, a little just a kind of red in the face. Take another shot. You gotta kind of work your way into this. And on the third shot, I would start to feel my heart start to pound. My shirt would get drenched in sweat. I would start to hyperventilate, like, we're doing all right so far. And then, after about 4 shots, it would come up, and I would just, let go with a really, really quality puke. Thank God this hotel room I used to hang in, the toilet was in the same room with the bed, sort of a design feature, I guess, of this hotel room, maybe to make convicts feel more at home upon release. I'm not really sure. But I found the magic of drinking on top of abuse, and that is if you hang in there, and that's an important feature. If you're going to drink on top of abuse, you need to hang in there. And in fact, you might need to reach down deep for a level of commitment you don't even know you have. And what I found that is I kept drinking and kept puking and kept drinking and kept puking for about an hour to an hour and a half, enough of the abuse to kick out of my system, and I would quit throwing up, and I would just be left with red face, hyperventilating, and sweating. And I'm all right with that. So I drank on top of abuse the last 7 months of my drinking. Second to last drunk, left for dead in a motel parking lot in a pool of blood, had to do reconstructive surgery on my face. My last night of drinking, I'm being let out of the San Diego jail, being transferred from civilian authorities back to military authorities. I'm in handcuffs. The handcuffs are extra tight that morning. And that morning, when they tried to bring me back to my ship, the officer deck put his arm up and said, wrong answer. Orders have been processed on this loser. The orders are 90 days in the brig, bad conduct discharge, or treatment. Now, as I stood there in handcuffs, I don't remember thinking it was a good idea to go to that treatment thing. I was literally weighing both of those. I could get out of this canoe club. I don't really belong here anyway. But I now know that it wouldn't have mattered what I thought about this option was thrown on the table, because I was in handcuffs. And I don't know about your experience in your life when you're in handcuffs, but in my life, whatever law enforcement agency had me in handcuffs, never once did they ever turn to me and say, so what's your opinion on this matter, right? When you're in handcuffs, you go where they say. That's just the way it goes. And I was taken up to this military treatment center up in the north end of San Diego at the Miramar Naval Air Station. So that's the same Navy base where the Top Gun pilot school was. And our section of barracks was called Top Drunk. That's what they called us. And it was in that military treatment center that I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was 25 years old. I was in horrible medical condition. They told me I had a liver of a 70-year-old man. They said that I had chronic alcoholism. And of course, they separated my body from alcohol the way any good hospital type situation would. And they gave me wonderful counseling that any human being could have benefited from. But the thing that saved my life and turned my life around right there at age 25 in January of 1987 was the fact that every 5 nights a week, I think, I may be wrong about that, but if I remember correctly, 5 nights a week, white vans, about 5 or 6 white vans would pull up in front of those barracks on that base, and about 6 of us would get into each one of those vans, and each one of those vans would be taken out to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was there that I was introduced to this thing that I have fallen in love with, that has not only saved my life, but has saved countless others that I have witnessed. And literally, allowed my mother to sleep well at night, and my father to be able to be proud of his son. It literally, it completely changed my life. Now, how? So after 45 days in that treatment center, I came out of that treatment center, and I went to, I didn't know what else to do. I went to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, a 6 o'clock gong show meeting. And I was sitting in the back. I didn't know anybody. The only reason I remembered where this meeting was because I was push starting my car, a little 68 Volkswagen, hole in the floorboard, had to push start it. I had to jam a screwdriver into the steering column and wiggle it. That was the car I got sober in. I had it until I was over 2 years sober too, because of this darn steps 8 and 9, right? That I couldn't even get a new car when I was sober with a Navy paycheck. But I remembered where this meeting hall was simply because it was located on an incline, right? There was a hill where that meeting hall was. And one of the tools of living when you're pushed out in your car is you don't like flat parking lots. You like a little incline, so the ease to get away. And I went into this Friday night gong show meeting, and I was sitting in the back. And the truth about my life is I was 45 days without a drink. I had a lot of information. And I was physically feeling better than I had felt since I'd been a young teenager. But there had been no spiritual awakening, spiritual experience, or even a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. And what was even more dangerous than that is I didn't know I needed one. Yes, at the meetings while I was in the treatment center, I had heard you guys talk about it, but it hadn't sunk in. I had a real sneaking suspicion I was down for the count, but I didn't really. I think the best way to describe it is I had surrendered to alcohol while I was in that treatment center. I would tell you from the depths of my soul, yes, alcohol has kicked my rear end. I absolutely agree with you. I cannot control it when I drink. And I absolutely agree with you that I seem to have this mind that lies to me. But surrendering to alcohol and surrendering to Alcoholics Anonymous are two different things. And as I sat there that night at that 6 p.m. gong show meeting, I had surrendered to alcohol temporarily. But until I surrender to Alcoholics Anonymous, that surrender to alcohol is only temporary, right? Many times in the alcoholic life, we surrender to alcohol. You can read it in Bill's story, right? Numerous times he admitted alcohol was his master. He was horrified at his drinking. He had even gotten the most amazing information to ever hit the planet directly delivered to him from Dr. Silkworth about allergy, the body, obsession, the mind, and he still drank, even though he had, so I believe that's where I was at 45 days without a drink. I had surrendered to alcohol, but I had not surrendered to Alcoholics Anonymous. And a big chunk of that, of surrendering to Alcoholics Anonymous, happens in step 3, in my opinion. So in that meeting, one guy operating his primary purpose found me sitting in the back. And he came up to me and he rather aggressively and loudly said, hey, rather startlingly, hey, what are you doing? I've never seen you here before. And now you see, back then you startle me, I might accidentally tell you the truth. You see, if you ease into the conversation and you give me a little wiggle room, I am going to figure out a lie to get you off my back. But this guy literally startled me. Hey, never seen you here before. What you doing? And so I accidentally told him the truth. And I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I just got out of a Navy treatment center a couple hours ago, and you got me. I don't know what I'm doing. This guy's eyes went bing, big smile went across his face. At the break, he was fighting his friends off. He's mine, mine. I didn't know you mark your newcomers. But this guy was especially glad to meet me that particular night because this guy's girlfriend, this was a Friday night, this guy's girlfriend had left him on Thursday night, the night before, for one of his friends in his home group. So he was wondering what he was going to do with his weekend: homicide, suicide, get loaded, or grab this newcomer. He's like all over me all weekend. We went to like 18 meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous that weekend. And that guy was just insane over this woman. In between each meeting, he'd throw me in the passenger side of his car and he'd start driving and he'd start yelling. He'd yell at me while he's driving. He wouldn't even look at the road. He had like one of those AA radar cars that just made it to the next meeting. right? If you've ever found yourself going to a meeting when you don't mean to, you may have worked step 3, right? it becomes absolutely instinctual to start participating in Alcoholics Anonymous at some point. And this is what happened with that. He's not even looking at the road. He's yelling at me. You got to go to meetings. Got to read the book. You got to get a sponsor. Damn her. Got to go to meetings. Got to read the book. Damn her. It's like spitting on me. And I was like, holy smoke. Now, I didn't know it, but I was getting a very early introduction to your typical AA relationship breakup is what I was getting. But I'm so very glad that that guy, that night, in his pain, was a guy in Alcoholics Anonymous who had taken the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, had done the work of Alcoholics Anonymous, and therefore he understood that the solution to his pain was out of self, out of self, out of self. I am so glad that that guy, that night, was not underneath his covers at home, whining into his sponsor's answer machine, that's a blast from the past, answer machine, pagers, cell phones, payphones. I'm so glad he was not at home underneath his covers, whining into his sponsor's answer machine. Sponsor, where are you? Fix me. Give me a golden answer. I'm in pain here. Right? I'm so glad this guy was out dragging my sorry butt around. And it seems to me that it's pretty obvious that this guy's sponsor had sponsored him something like this. Son, yes, I most certainly as your sponsor will guide you through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous as best I can. Yes, you and I can read the book together and I will impart any knowledge I have. Absolutely. I will answer questions about what the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, what it means to be in the home group and service to the home group. I will do everything I can to answer those questions and guide you as best I can. I'll even try to maybe even help you if I can with some of the other things in life. But son, if there's anything that is the most important, it would be this. Son, there's an invisible bridge, a quantum leap, if you may, that you need to figure out in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that is you need to start learning how to work with others in any fashion you can, because that's where you will find a deep and profound love of Alcoholics Anonymous that will be unshakable, and it will also allow you to have a lifetime of solutions at your fingertips. You won't always have to depend on me in crisis. It seems to me that's the way that fellow was sponsoring him. So I got back to my ship after that weekend, and the one other sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous on my ship was waiting for me. His name was Bob W. He became my first sponsor for my first 2 years while I still was in the Navy. And I don't even remember asking him at first. I asked him later, but at first he just started acting like he was my sponsor. He did not care. And he knew he sort of had a captive audience. He knew that I would have to jump overboard to get away from him. So he knew that was it, right? And there could not have been a better person for me at the time. Now, you got to hear this. He only had 14 months, right? He only had 14 months, but he was an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous. He had a sponsor. He was working steps. He didn't have any commitments, as we know, any long-term 6-month, 1-year commitments, simply because our ship left all the time. So there was no way for him to have that type of commitment. I didn't get what those were until I was a couple of years sober, and I saw other people doing it, but there was no way for me to do it until I got out of the Navy. But, you know, and now he was going to work with others and with me. And how that happened was he helped me. We both went to find meetings wherever we could, whenever the ship pulled into port. He taught me how to find meetings, how to call the central office, how to use a Thomas guide, how to make phone calls beforehand. And he was just learning as we were going also to find meetings in whatever country we were in. We would find meetings. Sometimes we would have to walk. The Uber wasn't around. Cell phones weren't around. Sometimes we would have to walk for an hour and a half to whole another side of town, wherever the ship would pull in. Sometimes there'd be taxis. We could do that, but we would find meetings all over the place. But the real meat and potatoes happened when we were out at sea. And he was taking instructions from his sponsor. He was spending a lot of quarters on payphones, talking to his sponsor back in San Diego. What do I do with this guy now? And when the ship was out at sea, he made me meet him in the aft end of the ship, way down in engine room number 2 in this little battery shop. And he showed up with that blue book. And the first time he showed up, he said, "Hey, I've been hounding you about reading this book for weeks, maybe even months now. Have you read it?" And I said something stupid like, yeah. There's like how it works. We antagonists. Some doctor has an opinion about something. And what he did next was he opened up the book and started to read from the beginning. And when he was tired, I would read. And what he started to impart what little knowledge he had and what little experience he had. Remember, he was only 14 months ahead of me. He was no expert. He was just trying to carry the message ever so feebly. But thank God, step 12 says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message. It does not say expertly. It doesn't even say carry it well. It just says we tried to carry this message, because in that effort of trying, the magic happens. So I got to tell you, when I would be looking at, during this time frame, I would often sit in meetings and I would hear them read the steps. And I would often sit there when they would read the steps and they would get to step 3 and they said, made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood him. And if I could have been honest, and if I had the courage, I would have, right in the middle when they were reading, I would have said, hey, wait, right after they said, step 3, made a decision to turn our will and life over to the care of God as we understood him. I would have stood up and gone, wait, hang on, I'm confused. I don't know what you mean. Just what do you mean by that? And just what do you want me to do? It's really quite funny. The book says the exact same thing, right? And I had that feeling all along. I remember there's one of the times when I read that in the book, just what do we mean by that? And what do we, do they want us to do? I read that and I go, oh, they're reading my mail. I had literally felt like that, because you want me to turn my will and life over to the care of God? That is so intangible, right? I don't know how to get my hands around that. You see, if you would have said, turn this bottle of water and this cell phone over to the care of James Lee, well, then, I would somehow mail it off to him or something, right? I would know that I did it. I would have faith, but you're saying my will and my life. If you would have told me, turn my car and my clothes over to the care of God, at least I know what you're talking about. If you would have said that, turn your, in order for you to stay sober, son, you need to turn your car and your clothes over to the care of God. What I would have done was I would have left that meeting and I said, I'll be right back. And I would have gone and push started my car. I would have puttered on down to a church down the street from the AA meeting hall, because that's where I guess God is. At that point in my life, I thought, based on my upbringing, that might be where it is. I would have puttered on down there. I would have knocked on the door. Some sort of pastor would have opened up the door, and I would have said, look, I'm in AA. They told me I needed to turn my car and my clothes over to the care of God. And so here's the screwdriver you need in order, you got to jam that into the steering column. You got to push start the thing and look out for the hole in the floorboard. Then I would have taken out my second uniform. I had a uniform that I wore on the base, a few uniforms. But whenever I left the base, I had another uniform I always wore at this time. They're black leather pants, black leather jacket, Metallica t-shirt, big black boots. My friend of mine told me at that point in my life, I had what he called IRS problems. That's imaginary rock star is what that is. And so that's what I would have taken those leather pants off and the leather jacket. The leather pants probably could have stood there on their own. And I would have handed the screwdriver to that pastor, and I would have left there naked, feeling silly. But I could have come back to the meeting and said, I turned my car and my clothes over to the care of God as I understand him, I guess. I don't know what the care of God is, but that's the best idea I got. And I've turned my car and clothes over, right? But you're not asking me to turn something tangible. You're asking me to turn my will and my life. And I didn't know what that meant. And it was really, really important for me to really get a hold of what they're talking about when they're asking me to turn my will and my life. And what I have come to find out, and I'm not going to go into a lengthy explanation, but I'm going to shorten it up a little bit. My will is my thinking. My life is the sum total of the actions that I've taken so far. That's really it. When I think I will do something, I think it's a good idea. I think I will. I should. They said I should. I'm certainly thinking about it. taking some sort of action. Let's say if I was taking a drink of water, I think I will. It's a good idea. I'm feeling a little thirsty. I think I should drink some water. Boy, my mouth is really getting dry. I should, based upon my experience, adding a little water certainly will help. But if I don't do anything, it doesn't do a thing, until I actually do this and take that small little action, it means nothing. My life would not change. I'd stay in the same state of a dry mouth, thirsty, until I take the action. So my will is my thinking. My life is a sum total of actions that I've taken, and I've never been able to control my thinking. I wouldn't even know how to turn that over to anything. So I want to shorten it up just a little bit, turn my actions over to the care of God as I understood him. And if I'm looking for a place to turn my actions over to that represent the care of God, where would that be? I want to say that again. If I am looking for a place to turn my actions over to that represent the care of God, where would that be? I'm going to tell a silly little story right now, and it's certainly not really how I believe, but it's, it's a little bit of how my mind thinks about spiritual things. And I'm going to tell a silly little very fictional story about how I think the birth of Alcoholics Anonymous happened, right? And again, silly and fictional, but it sort of describes it for me. The way I kind of look at it is somewhere in the early 1930s, up there, wherever it is that we go after we leave this life, up there, we like to call it the Great Meeting. Vikings call it Valhalla. Western civilizations called it heaven. There's just a million different. I love the idea of the big meeting in the sky, and I've often wondered whether they're going to make me mop floors for 6 months when I get there, or whether they'll even let me raise my hand to share. They're probably going to make me mop floors for 6 months when I get there. Hopefully, it's not too soon. But up there, wherever it is that we go, in the early 1930s, up there, all of the greatest spiritual leaders of all time. And I might even be a little historically incorrect in this story also, so don't judge me on that. I'm aware of it, but there's storytelling purposes here. Up there, in the early 1930s, all of the greatest leaders, all of the greatest spiritual leaders of mankind, were all looking down on us. And Abraham, Abraham's there, Buddha's there, Jesus is there, Buddha, Gandhi, all of them are there. And I think it was even Abraham that called the group conscience. Abraham said, hey, guys, come on, take a look. Let's take a look. It's already, early 1930s, and look at down there on the planet. Look at those. We've given, over the centuries, we have given them at least 20 perfectly decent pathways to experience what it is we know. And there's at least 20, if not more, perfectly viable pathways to experience the world of the spirit. And look at those alcoholics and drug addicts down there, still dying in gutters, prisons, disappointing everybody, and dying way before their time, wasting their talent. And look at them down there. I want to throw an idea out, guys. I think Abraham was the one that put this together. Hey, guys, do they deserve their own specific, unique pathway to God? Do you think we ought to give them one more specifically designed for the alcoholic? I don't know. Let's chat. Let's chat about that and bounce some ideas. Let's have a group conscience, but we'll discuss it first. And so they started talking about the pros and cons as to whether we deserved our own unique pathway to God and what that would look like. And as they were discussing, I think Gandhi chimed in and said, well, if we are to give them their own unique pathway to God, I think part of their solution would be that they get to incessantly talk about themselves. And they bounced that back and forth. And indeed, they included that. Yep, we're put together a package and we're going to do this. And so they decided they had to look down on earth and decide how this was going to happen. And they looked down and they found a stock speculator and a proctologist. My late sponsor, Eddie C., called that odds and ends, is what he called that. And the gift was given, this unique, specific pathway to God that had never hit the planet. It used a lot of the other principles that were already here. They didn't make up anything new, but somehow they condensed it down to some simplistic form for the rebellious, difficult, selfish and self-centered to the extreme alcoholic who would only grasp a hold with their last dying breath. And the birth of Alcoholics Anonymous came. And if you look at the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, you might agree with me. There's no other way to describe it than the loving hand of the Creator. There's just too many coincidences and too many things that happened in the same decade that were required to create Alcoholics Anonymous, that all happened in the same decade. There's no way to describe it other than the loving hand of God. So if I can accept that, and I'm a newly sober alcoholic that's looking for a place that represents the care of God to turn my life over to and my actions over to, where would it be? It would be Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And you see, so many, if you were to go, if one of you guys with a lot of time and you work with newcomers, you probably work with some people in recovery houses, sober houses, Salvation Army, wherever, if you went into one of those places and said to one of those kids, hey, your life depends on your answer to this question. Did you live in the essence of step 3 today? The kid would go, geez, I don't know. Man, don't scare me. My life depends on, yes, your life depends on your answer to that question. Did you live in the essence of step 3? The kid would have said, well, yes, I tried to turn it over. What does that mean, kid? What does it mean? I want more specific. But you see, if we literally view step 3 as just turning my actions over to the care of Alcoholics Anonymous, because there is no better representation of the care of God than Alcoholics Anonymous for a newly sober alcoholic. If that new guy in that recovery house knows that, he can answer when the old timer comes in, hey kid, did you live in the essence of step 3? That kid could sit straight up and say, why, yes, I did. I went to 2 meetings today. I called my sponsor. One of those meetings was a literature-based book study. I actually looked out for a guy that had, I've only got 40 days, but I looked out for a guy that had 4 days. I actually don't have much of a message to carry, but I carried him to where the message was, right? So I did my part. He could look at that old timer. Yes, I was living in the essence of step 3. Or he could sit up and go, no, I forged my meeting card that they make me sign here. And I lied about the meetings. I didn't call my sponsor. I lied to my mother and I stole some money. No, I didn't. But I'll try harder tomorrow. At least the kid would know where he's at. And knowing where you're at, either in or out, is a very valuable piece of information, right? Because if we don't even know we're out, how do we know we're even in, right? And so we got to we want to survey what we're doing on a daily basis to know whether I have turned my will and life over to the care of Alcoholics Anonymous, which again, I want to really drive home that I truly believe there's no better representation of the care of God than Alcoholics Anonymous. And on the idea of not knowing whether we're in or out and where we kind of stand, I like to tell this little story about that idea. When I was 17 years sober, I got married, and we have 2 beautiful kids. We both just love them to death, but the marriage didn't work out. I know none of you have ever gone through a divorce here in AA. I'm the only one, I'm sure. Right? And boy, oh boy, is that tough. Talk about needing to redo step 3, doing another inventory, having to surrender again. Divorces when you got long-term sobriety, and especially when everybody loves your ex-wife too. And she's a good woman and she's a good mother, but we just couldn't live together. And we had a very, very important task to do when we decided we couldn't stay together because we both loved those kids so much. And we could either fight or we could learn to cooperate. And we have learned to cooperate. We've been divorced now for, I think, goodness sakes, 12 years we've been divorced. Our kids are 13 and 15 now. But one of the things in the agreement, and one of the agreement was that I would continue to pay for the house that they were in. I moved down near my office I continued to pay for the house and the utilities and everything, and pay, keep the house going. That was part of the agreement. And she would design her life to be a really good mom and run them to school and run all the soccer errands. And I would join in whenever I could. And we would not fight over custody. The kids could come and go as they want. But the reason I'm bringing this up is in that agreement that we signed, and lawyers had to sign it, that I would continue to provide for the family where they were, was a representation of my care of my children, right? Hopefully I have always shown more that I love my kids in a lot of other ways, but the care of my children was represented in that house, the utilities, the clothes, the money that was used, right? The material things to represent my care of my children. Let's say, and now that house was on a golf course that I was a member of, and now let's say, and again, this never happened, but just hypothetically, let's say I was driving up early in the morning, and to get to the golf course, I'd have to drive by that house. And let's say I would drive by early in the morning on a very cold winter California morning, maybe about 58 degrees or something. Some of you guys in other parts of the country, what? Right? That's a cold morning in California. But let's say I was driving up real early and I was driving by the house. And again, this never happened, but imagine if I drove by early in the morning and I found my children outside the house, naked and freezing. Dad! And I would have slammed on my brakes. I'd hop out of the car and go, what on earth are you doing outside the house? And they go, we're cold, Dad. We are just so cold. We're freezing hell. And I would look inside the windows of the house and I would probably see my ex-wife making breakfast, and their clothes would be on the bed. And I'd be wondering, what on earth are you doing outside the house? But Dad, there's this boy at school that's bothering me and I don't know what to do. And we'll talk about that later, Madison. Get back in the house. Get back in the house. And how many times through our lives and our sobriety have we gotten too busy with things, and we don't start not really calling our sponsor, drop a few commitments because of work or family issues, and don't really take into careful consideration what we're dropping out, not really working with people and not really attending as many meetings, and certainly not going on those jail panels and starting to say no to requests from AA. And all of a sudden we find ourselves feeling naked and out in the world, and we are going to God, help! What's going on here? What's going on here? Far be it from me to second guess what God may or may not say, but I look at it this way. I think God looks at that prayer and goes, what are you doing outside the house? What on earth get back in the house? We'll talk about, but God, my job is falling apart. We will talk about that later. Get back in the house. And I think that's one of the biggest issues of, have I really turned my whole being over to the care of Alcoholics Anonymous? Because I truly believe there is no better representation of the care of God than Alcoholics Anonymous for a man like me. So I believe I am getting real close to being done. I want to thank Joe for asking me to do this. Great to see my friend James there. Are you down in Florida? And wish Polly a happy birthday. I sent her a text earlier, and it's just been a real privilege to be here today. Thank you so much.